Guys, this is Mr. Sisson, and we are going to do a hopefully quick workshop on choosing your first topics. So these are just part of a bigger, you're going to basically have 5 different proposals. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that these work, because the next month of your time in this class, you're going to be spending time dealing with these topics, which means it needs to be something that you can research. It needs to be kind of unique, and it needs to be something that has the theme conflict and compromise in it. And so I want to take a quick look at this and read this before we start. So before you can choose one topic for your National History Day project, you'll need to submit 5 separate topic proposals to Liu, Sisson, and Mitchell. The questions included in each proposal need to be answered with at least 1 to 2 sentences, so that's down here. However, you should be as detailed as possible in answering how the topic is connected to the theme conflict and compromise. This part is really important because that's how if you want to compete, if you want to do anything, it needs to match what they want you to do, what National History Day wants you to do. Also, it's always good work trying to look at history through a certain lens, which is what this is, looking for conflict and compromise in our history and for you guys in our country's history. So your group is going to present your proposals to one of our facilitators on Friday, December 8th, and a decision will be made on which topic you'll have for the rest of the project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one of these with you guys. So for my first topic proposal, I have one that I'm going to work through a lot of this project with, and I wanted to pick something that I didn't think any of you guys would want to do, and that's why I chose Chester A. Arthur. And this was a president after the Civil War. I think maybe 3 presidents after. No, probably 4 presidents after Lincoln. I don't know, something like that. But he's got some interesting things in his past that I'm kind of interested to see. He became president after James Garfield was assassinated, and there were some things that he did with government offices. And I know right now you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to learn more about Chester A. Arthur. But basically that's about the extent of my knowledge right now, because I want this to be pretty authentic, so that you watch me wrestle through these thoughts, the same kind of thoughts that you are. I don't know a whole lot about Chester A. Arthur right now. But why am I interested in this? Okay, I'm going to write this right now. Chester A. Arthur became president after James Garfield was assassinated. And the reason I'm especially interested in him right now is because of this next thing. Although he was put in power, basically he became vice president by a political boss, which we'll learn more about, by the political boss system, and I'm not sure what the political boss's name was, so we'll see, was put in power by the political boss system. When he became president, he worked to tear the boss system down. So you may not know what the boss system is, you may not know who how that worked, but we're going to hopefully find out a little bit more about this. So I'm interested in that, mainly for the human element, to think that a guy could just change. Like he benefited from a system and then he was like, no, this is bad, I'm going to tear it down. That's really interesting to me. So what do you already know about this? I know Chester A. Arthur made a lot of money because of positions he was given in government. He was the collector of the port of New York, which meant any ships that were brought in, goods that were brought in or sent out, went through him, which meant he could make a lot of money. And after he became president, he basically changed his beliefs completely. That's about what I know. How will I conduct my research? Well, this is something that I'm going to have to find out right now. Which sources did I find that address the topic? Well, I don't know that stuff yet, so I'm going to have to do that. So, how will I conduct my research? Here's the first thing I'm going to do. Because remember this bottom part. how is this topic tied to the theme of conflict and compromise? Okay, so I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to type in something like this: Chester A. Arthur compromise. Boom. I'm going to see if anything comes up. And I'm going to look down through here. So first of all, one thing that I'm going to see is right here. On the 36th ballot, James Garfield, a Civil War general and congressman from Ohio, was chosen as the compromise candidate. Chester A. Arthur was selected as his running mate. Okay, so that sounds like there is a compromise present. And remember, these can be in any order. You don't necessarily have to have conflict and then a compromise. You could just find, stop that before it gets going. You could find a compromise that led to a conflict. They can work like that. So let's read this first paragraph. This is history.com. Chester Arthur, the 21st president, took office after the death of President James Garfield. As president from 1881 to 1885, Arthur advocated for civil service reform. Basically, this was a big thing in the 1800s and early 1900s, because basically if a president was elected, he could put anybody he wanted in a lot of government positions. So things like, this doesn't sound interesting at all to you probably, but like postmaster generals and tax collectors and all these things, they would pass those positions out to people that were friends with them. And so it meant that you didn't have to have any qualifications for it. And it meant that basically it was a really corrupt system. So civil service reform, anytime you see someone talking about that, what those people tried to do is say, hey, if you want to be the postmaster general, you probably should know something about being a postmaster. And if you're going to be a tax collector, you probably should know something about finance. And so there were a lot of, they wanted to have like tests and things like that for people to get those government positions. A Vermont native, he became active in Republican politics in the 1850s as a New York City lawyer. In 1871, an era of political machines and patronage, Arthur was named to the powerful position of customs collector for the Port of New York. He later was removed from the job by President Rutherford B. Hayes in an attempt to reform the spoil system. That's the same thing we're talking about. The boss system is the spoil system. Elected to the vice presidency in 1880, Arthur became president after Garfield died following an assassination attempt by a disgruntled job seeker, someone who wanted him to give him a job. While in office, Arthur rose above partisanship and in 1883 signed the Pendleton Act, which required government jobs to be distributed based on merit. Suffering from poor health, he did not run for re-election in 1884. Okay, so let's go back to this thing, because we've seen a few conflicts and compromises already, right? I'm going to put some of these in here. Conflict, James Garfield, the president over Arthur, gosh, I can't type that name at all, was assassinated. Compromises, James Garfield was a compromise candidate. What that means is the Republican Party had two candidates they were trying to nominate, and the two sides couldn't agree, so they put Garfield forward as someone who could take office. And this seems like a pretty critical one, because this led to Arthur being president eventually. Conflict, I think that there's something there about rising above partisanship. That means anytime you're partisan, that means like, all right, I'm a Republican, I do what the Republicans want. Or I'm a Democrat, I do what the Democrats want. What it's saying here is Arthur rose above partisanship and in 1883 signed the Pendleton Act, which required government jobs to be distributed on merit. So he went against his party. He went against the Republican Party. And so I'm going to go back. I've got way too many tabs. Chester A. Arthur, gosh, I can't type that name. Opposed his own party in proposing civil, I don't know if that's capitalized at all, civil service reform. Okay, so there's a couple things there. I wonder if there's anything else. This is just one paragraph, right? Well, I think this is enough on a basic level, but what I've done, I read one paragraph on this, and I might have some questions or things like that, probably still do, because right now I'd be looking at what I just wrote, and I'd be like, so who were his party bosses or leaders that he opposed? It seems like they would be pretty important. in this story. Okay, so I'm going to come back up here. Chester A. Arthur is a president. I'm going to be able to find a lot. Going to use Google, but that's not going to be enough. I mean, so this is going to be maybe kind of basic for you guys. You may not have a lot of information there, but if you are wanting to do something that's a little bit more recent, you might be able to interview people. This is where you would say something like, I'm going to interview whatever, my grandfather who lived through the Civil War in El Salvador. I can't remember where that was. Someone did something like that last year. I'm going to interview so-and-so, or I'm going to the University of Arkansas Library to explore their resources. You know, as I'm doing this, you might see that I might take this out because I don't think this is a spot where you really need to answer it. So, okay, next one. Which sources did you find that address this topic? I'm going to go ahead and put this history.com link in here. If I had more time, if I was like spending a class period doing this, I would throw some more in there, and I bet I would find some more answers down here. And then what type of project will you create? The important thing for you guys to keep in mind is if you're doing a documentary, you need to be doing a topic that is recent enough that, so I'm going to write this stuff out here. Documentaries, you want those to be really in the past 60 years because you need video for that to work. If you are doing an exhibit, basically the same thing too, past 60 years. Basically, if you get before like the Great Depression, you're not going to be able to find enough to make it engaging. Or that's exhibits. Let's say website. Exhibits, you need a lot of color pictures, not paintings, pictures. So this you need to have probably Civil War and on to the present day. If you get before the Civil War, it's hard to find any photographs. There's just a few. And so you want to make sure that you're in a spot where you can have pictures there. Everything else can really be at any other point in U.S. history. Performances, paper. Any point in U.S. history, because you don't need that multimedia as much. So for me, I'm doing Chester A. Arthur. He was from the 1880s, and so that means I could do really any of website, exhibit, paper, or performance. This is a big decision, and I might change my mind. This doesn't have to be what I do always. I could change, but big decision, big decision. You know what? I'm going to do a website. Actually, I'm not going to do a website because that's past before 60 years. So I am going to do a, gosh, should I do a performance? That'd be kind of funny, wouldn't it? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not bold enough. I'm going to do an exhibit. This is riveting. Let's just say I'm going to do a paper or a performance. I'm going to do a performance. So at the end of this project, I will be Chester A. Arthur or someone associated with Chester A. Arthur. That's my proposal here. Now, I'd move on to 2, and I'm going to come up with another one. And so that's basically the rhythm of how it'll work. If you have any questions, you can talk to us, but by the end of the week, you are going to propose these, and you will end up with one that is approved, and it'll be your working NHD topic. It'll get more specific, but at least it'll be a start. All right, thanks, guys.